Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wizard Factory. This is going to be podcast episode number 5. I'm Logan Hart. This is
And I'm
Brian
Brian.
Easterday. Yes. Brian, you can say your own name, of course.
Sorry.
And tonight's topic is called The Magic Pill, Why We Want It Now. And this topic here is all about instant gratification, but it goes a little bit deeper than that as well. So, what is the magic pill? We're looking at it's a psychological state of mind that I think a lot of us are very prone or susceptible to falling into, and ultimately the underlying issue about this wanting it now and not having to work for it is trying to bypass the essential component of struggle of the spiritual experience. And I think that's a pretty good introduction there, because that's really what we're getting at is, it's about that struggle. So I wanted to finish the opener here with a quote by Muhammad Ali that it jumped out at me, and I feel like it encapsulates this perfectly. So Muhammad Ali said, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion." And I think, that, like I said, that really sums up the dynamic that we're wanting to get into here tonight, because just to finish up with this little idea here is this concept to me that I realized that essentially pain, suffering, struggle is a part of life. It's not all there is to life, but it's part of the duality that is constantly transmuting. I mean, think of like a diamond. It doesn't become a diamond without intense pressure crushing it, and in temperature and all that kind of stuff that's transforming it into something new and more precious. And basically, so if pain is inevitable, we don't get a choice in the matter, right? We're here, we're alive, and this is part of the experience. But we do get to choose one thing. Do you want to suffer now and reap the long-term benefits of delayed gratification? Or do we want a little bit of gratification now, and then we are faced with the polar opposite of a long-term pain and anguish from that dynamic? So, and there's lots of examples we can get into. But Brian, do you want to so far riff on anything of what I've said yet?
Yeah, no, I think it's good to really I think it's good to make sure we come at this from an empowered state of mind here too, and recognizing that even though pain may be part of life, that there may be some suffering there, some apophatic experiences, that we can look at those as challenges, just like in every hero's journey, it's that challenge that really makes the story really good. So
Mm,
coming at it from that perspective, I think is a lot healthier way. We can really empower ourselves to look at challenges as something that can actually, even though they may be difficult, they can actually better us.
right. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I fully agree with that, because the older I get and the more you start just kind of learning how things work, and understanding, especially being an individual who has at some point in their life made a conscious decision to become committed to the process, right? There's kind of
Mhm.
two kinds of people in life: ones that just sort of float through and take the path of least resistance, and they don't question anything, and then you see them 20 years later and that they're the same exact person with just a bigger belly. And then there's people that are just constantly on that spiritual grind, who are always looking for the next thing that they can take into themselves, integrate it, and be transformed by it. And Yeah, that's one thing that I picked up and just sort of, intuitively along the way is that when you start understanding the bigger picture of how this works, you can actually start appreciating that that struggle. You can actually
Hmm.
start getting excited about that challenge. You know what I mean?
Yes. Hmm.
Right. Because
Absolutely.
you know what it means. There's a book called, I think, No Mud, No Lotus or something like that. And it's
Mm-hmm.
basically conveying this spiritual concept of like without that muck to dig into and just wall around in, there can be no beautiful fruits produced from that. That's what understanding the laws of gender and polarity and these universal laws are really all about is and once you recognize them, you can see them everywhere. And then of course start tapping into that power of that understanding.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just like in our last talk that we did, where we talked about shit being the catalyst for growth, in
Mm,
context to, gardening and everything. Like it is that struggle. So I think it's going to be good to maybe look at, these different mindsets here. And I think some of the ways that we can see, some of the places where we see we want this instant gratification,
hmm.
we can see it play out in technology, was one that, you had mentioned earlier when we were talking. And, being able to just have that instant access to information or to products or
Entertainment.
entertainment, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever it may be,
Just
that kind
flipping
of,
through channels, Netflix,
mhm,
everything's just right there, drive through.
yeah. And whenever we have that, that can kind of get us disconnected from the process of, uh, understanding that everything actually is a process. It starts locking us
Mm,
into this mindset of thinking everything should be this instantaneous reward. And we
right.
say this, I think another a really big one that we could hit on here is the wanting the instant gratification when it comes to like medication, both
Mm,
like pharmaceutical medication, but also drugs, because addiction, that's another thing we could really tie in here is wanting
mm,
that instant gratification to cover up whatever you're not wanting to actually deal with.
absolutely.
So,
And you
maybe we
can
can
you can
delve into this
actually.
one probably quite a bit here.
Oh yeah. No, that's a great way that you laid that out there because you can kind of look at the relationship between those things and how they actually are very cyclical because
Mhm.
it starts with the, instant gratification of like the junk food. I want that good taste now,
Yeah,
and then that breeds sickness. And then instead of reversing that by eating healthy and healing the body, no, no, now I just want that magic pill that's going to fix my sickness. And then you're just
yeah,
masking symptoms after symptoms, just masking and putting band-aids on shit.
hmm,
And the
exactly.
problem grows.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very cyclical.
absolutely. Yeah, and like you said, just understanding even when people say they want to heal themselves or they want to better their body in some way, but they're wanting this quick fix pill or for whatever the problem may be, it's really just ignoring that fact of life that everything is a process, it's a cycle.
Mm.
And if you want something, you're going to have to not only take action on it, but take continued action.
Ooh, yeah,
It's not
that's
just
a
this like one and done thing, actually. And this is kind of just coming up. I had a friend recently that I hadn't talked to in many years, and um, he was asking me about meditation, so I gave him a meditation, and he and said it was really enjoyable for him. He really liked it. And he is going to do it again, but he's like, this work? Is it like a one and done kind of thing? I was like,
mm.
I kind of laughed a little bit. And I was like, no, it's good, but it's something that you're going to want to continue to do it because the more you delve into it, the more
Mm.
reward you're going to get from it. But it's a very kind of Western mindset that we can see here. And I think it
Hmm.
ties back good with this, is that instant gratification of like, okay, so I can just do this thing really quick and everything will be okay.
Right.
No, we're going to
That's
have to
the
take
general
continued
mindset.
action. Mm-hmm.
That is absolutely the general mindset that we're looking at here. And
Yeah.
I think the gym is a really good analogy that that you really see this play out in
Ooh,
many
yeah.
ways. So like, this first portrays the example of how I was saying, like, the pain part is inevitable. Well, when you go and do those squats, or you're doing the bench press, or you're running on the treadmill or whatever, it fucking hurts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, if you're super out of shape, it's going to hurt worse, which is going to
Yeah.
even, like, what's the word? Discourage you from doing it even more. It takes even more willpower to sort of push through that barrier. But then
Right.
damn well, once you've been up there for a few minutes, or once you get those first couple of sets in and the blood's all pumping through your body, next thing you know, you're just like, damn, this feels good, and you feel empowered. Then you feel good about yourself too, because you're actually doing the thing that you said you're good. So you're in your integrity. So you're like, yes, I'm not a total piece of shit today. I'm actually doing what I said I'm going to do. And,
Right.
and then, yes, it still hurts. But what happens, especially the more you become a gym rat and you build that habit of going every day for a month or whatever, each
Mm-hmm.
day you feel excited about it. And then I know for me personally too, when I got a really good workout in and my muscles are just destroyed and like super sore, I actually like that feeling of being really, really sore, because it reminds me that I'm pushing myself and that I'm getting stronger through that pain, through
Mm-hmm.
that adversity and struggle. That last set, the one that you didn't want to do, and you're sitting there and you're shaking, and you're focusing all your mental faculties into just pushing that bar up or whatever, dude. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that is where it's at. And that same kind of dynamic can apply, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, universally applicable.
Yeah, and likewise, if you're going to the gym, you don't expect to get all the way to your goal there in one
Yeah,
workout. It's going to
exactly.
be a
Yeah,
process.
that's the
Yeah.
other thing I was going to say. It's like, okay, I did one set of squats. Okay, do I have that booty
Yeah,
yet?
like
Is
you're
it
good to
is it
go.
good? Is it good? No, no, no. You know. Yeah, do keep going. Keep going. You're doing
Yeah,
great.
that's good. That's good. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think, another kind of subject we could hit on this with that we can see play out that is a big one is food. And this can kind of tie
Oh
back
yeah.
into our last couple talks that we did, in
Mm.
context of permaculture. But with our food, we've really learned to get this instant gratification of being able to just have this quick access of, the example I was thinking of is like even just going to the store and looking and seeing vegetables or fruit or whatever, and it's already there, and you just expect it. It's there, you buy it, and then you have it. It's very instant, but
But
it
we
really
could we
disconnects
could
you from
take
the
it
process.
honestly, not to interrupt, but I mean, like, we could look at the whole process of from the becoming becoming, a seed in the ground. We're flash growing. Let's think about the terminology: flash growing crops. We don't want to wait. We just need to, like, pop them out, and there's no nutrients inside, and then we throw them on a truck and send them off. Instead of like cultivating that painstaking care of like growing really high quality
Right,
food. It's
and that's what I was getting to is it
Mhm.
disconnects us from the process of actually understanding that there is a process of what it actually takes to grow that food through the whole season and
Mm.
things like that. Um, so I think that's definitely another a way we can see this instant gratification kind of play out in our society.
Mhm.
Um, and another way is with knowledge and belief systems.
Mm.
A lot of people will, if they are coming across the problem in their life, they're like, they'll just, sometimes they'll come to you like as a teacher and they'll have this really big problem and they'll want like this one simple little answer, what can I do to just fix this instantly?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you just have to tell them that's not how it works. Like it's,
Right.
this
You
is
have
going to
to
take work
study
and commitment and study, and you're going to
and
have to,
true
be
understanding.
right and be willing to put the time into doing the ritual, doing whatever practice it is, so you start working with those things that you're unaware of, and being able to bring those to the surface to process them. And that's so many people are just looking for a quick fix. Sorry, I thought my connection was bad there. So
Oh,
many people are looking for like a quick fix belief system, or like I said, some little bit of knowledge that they'll find this one little thing and it'll fix, it could be financial knowledge. They get this one financial tip and it's going to fix all their money problems, or it could be relationship advice. You're going to read this one book on relationships. You're going to, do this one thing, and somehow that's going to fix your, very unhealthy relationship.
And,
all going to take time.
And what does that sound like? When you're saying that, it reads just like the little headlines for the clickbaits, right? When you're on the websites and you get to the end of the article, all the little ads down there say like, try this one weird trick to do such and such. Whatever. It's just like, here's a magic pill, just click it. Yeah. It's all just selling you magic pills, dude, everywhere, because they know that psychologically that's where people are at, and they're just like, oh yeah, I want that. But real quick though, because I feel like we could have definitely gone more into that food aspect that you brought up too, because again, I want to kind of look at the whole from the seed, and then it's flash grown, shipped off, and then you so there's that, then getting it at the grocery store. So you didn't create that food, you don't. And it's all about kind of appreciating the process of what it takes to get these things too. That's why, it's all about like millennials, this or whatever. It's the younger generation, because they don't know how hard we had it back in the day and what it took to just get this one little thing that they now have on command, But anyway, and then so then you buy the food, right? And then you get it home, and then what are you gonna do? Well, you got microwaves. You don't even have to cook the shit anymore. You just put it in here, mash some buttons, and then it cooks for you or whatever. It's like everything's instant hot pockets, instant mashed potatoes. Just like now. And what happens too? That's pretty much like the unhealthiest food that you can eat as well. So there's a correlation there for sure. There's definitely something too that's that's linked to those two dynamics there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think really another great way to look at this is with the concept of justice in our society. Whenever typically in our society with government and authority there, the reason people want to have that, the justification they use for it, is that if bad people do this thing, then somebody needs to be there to stop them or to punish them or whatever that is. But that's really based off of the false premise that there isn't cosmic law, that there isn't this thing called cause and effect and karma,
yes,
that will actually take care of it in and of itself. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the person will have an instantaneous punishment for what they did wrong. Sometimes it may take a while. It's not going to be just this 1-to-1 ratio. Sometimes it may take a while to play out. Sometimes they may not experience that karma until far down the road, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to experience it.
Right. It might not even happen in their lifetime, but in a future reincarnation. And that's, it's ironic because, you hear people think, like Christians, when they talk about like, it's not my place to judge, like only God can judge them. It's funny because they don't realize they're talking about karmic law, but that's what it's at. That's the true meaning of the words that they're saying that they get from the scriptures, is like, like it's all going to come around, and they may not see it and they may not even understand it, but the universe is more intelligent than you are, and it's going to do its thing, basically.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely something that in our society, obviously that's a big one, that people really, they want that instant gratification. They want that instant sense of justice every time there's been some kind of wrongdoing or something like that. But I think when we can step back and look at it, even if we were wanting to say be the ones that were serving the karma, in this physical plane. So let's use like an example here. Say someone was trying to rob somebody, and then they've committed violence against you, they've aggressed upon you, and then you use force to repel that. So you shoot them or whatever. You can look at it, from lots of different ways. Yeah, that's instant karma, but it's also being dealt out that effect by the person that it's the harm is being done against. And the person, shooting them, that doesn't necessarily even mean they would have to fatally shoot the person. They could just, shoot them in the kneecap or something like that. So there's also, different levels of escalation, where
Sure.
using the proper amount of force, the proper amount of karma to actually repel, what is being done. Because someone making a stupid decision on something, but that isn't necessarily life-threatening, doesn't necessarily deserve to lose their life over that. They may just need to learn a really hard fucking lesson the hard way.
But even that said, though, my thing is, somebody might overreact and kind of not meet with proper due force in that situation. But you know what? That's kind of a risk you take when you go and do something stupid like rob someone or whatever. And that's kind of the, it's a little bit of a gray area for me, because it's like, especially very new age minded people say, like, if you meet force with force, you're just being, the thing that you say you hate, or you're joining the evil or something like that. And it's like, no, first of all, you're neutralizing the situation. You're restoring things back to the default state, which is peace and freedom. And it's like, if say somebody's waving a gun around, for example, and pointing it at people, it's like, okay, well, they weren't harming anybody, and then somebody shot them. But guess what? Again, if you don't, it's kind of simple, don't wave a gun around and you're a lot less likely to get shot. You know what I mean? It's not rocket science. It's called common sense. Don't be a moron. It's a risk you take when you do something stupid like that.
Yeah. Sorry, Martha. Let's see. And this is another kind of big way we can see this play out. And this is something that, one of my favorite teachers, brings up a lot. But it's kind of this idea that where people will demand a teacher's time or somebody's time, just because they want it. So if somebody has a channel or something, these type of people, they'll come on and they'll start arguing, and then they'll expect that teacher, that person who runs that channel, should sit there and argue with them all day just to, defend their position. What that is that's a person, like, as we like to joke about it, that's a person with spiritual blue balls. And they're frustrated, and they don't feel like they got enough attention, and they're craving that attention. They're craving that. Yeah. They're wanting that energy, and that acknowledgement. So then they go around and they project on the thing, everybody else's stuff, as a way of trying to get that energy, even though they may not consciously realize they're doing this. But that's something I think in our Western society, everybody, and especially with things like technology, a lot of people don't actually take the time to respect teachers, and to actually, approach them in a respectful way. Where if you look at, in Eastern traditions, the way they work with their teachers is definitely a lot different as compared to kind of the Western mindset, where people kind of expect that, they want these instant results, or, just give me that golden little nugget that will fix everything for me. And it's like, no, that's not how this is going to work. You're going to have to take the time to actually look at the knowledge and look at the information and put it into practice. And really go through the process.
Which, again, true teaching is about transformation. If one golden nugget isn't going to do anything for you as a person, I mean, it's not like, hacking, again, with the clickbait titles, this one weird hack will change blah blah blah. It's about true transformation, really becoming something new, and that doesn't happen overnight.
Right. And I think why is the reason that we kind of try to shun away from the process and go for that instant gratification. And it's because that process is difficult. It's a struggle sometimes. It takes dedication and continued action and willpower, and going for the instant gratification. It's the easy route, that you're like, oh, you can do this, and just distract yourself from it a little bit longer and a little bit longer.
But it's cheap. That's the
Right,
problem. You
right,
never get what you think you're bargaining for.
right.
It's just, yeah. It's like getting putting the quarter in and getting that little piece of bubble gum, and it tastes good for like 3 seconds,
Right.
and then it tastes like Gollum.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah,
Let's see.
earlier we were talking about, you brought up a really great point that I'd like to see if you could riff on here, which was
Hmm.
acquired
About
taste.
right, right.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
so like, I find personally some of my favorite things in life, just generally speaking, I didn't even necessarily really like that much at first,
Hmm.
and it's some things, even just appreciation, takes time to develop. There's
Right.
nuance, there's depth to it. So, something that just think of something of value is going to have like a richness to it, a depth to it. And you can't possibly experience that to a degree to fully appreciate the fullness of it in a 30-second, it's like putting on a movie, and then the first 30 seconds you're like, this movie's really boring or whatever, and you haven't even given it a chance yet. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
that just kind of uh, I don't know. I'm silently judging you if you do that, basically. Just off. I just find in general, often the finest things in life take time to kind of appreciate, and I think that
Hmm.
appreciation is kind of another aspect of this that we can look at. That plays into the whole instant
Yeah.
gratification thing. Is just kind of like you're trying to tell, just imagine this, you're trying to tell a child about this amazing, super complex, rich thing, and they're just like, yeah, I don't really care about that, I just want this, like, now, I just want it now, like those two kind of go together. It's like the two sides of the spectrum a little bit.
Hmm.
And I think of it kind of like a really good analogy for me is, imagine like this big epic movie like Star Wars or like Braveheart or something, and you just pop the movie in, and you go to the menu back, the DVD menu, which probably isn't a thing anymore, and you just go to the final scene, the big epic ending or whatever.
Hmm.
You just skip right to it. Is that really going to mean anything?
Hmm.
Are you going to feel it? Does it move you emotionally if you're just skipping right to the end? I'm willing to bet that it doesn't. Why? Honestly, it's because you didn't journey with the characters through their struggle. I mean, that's why they call it drama, is
Hmm.
because that's the process. It's the journey. It's just as much the journey as the destination. I think some people say it's only about the journey, or it's only about the destination. I think they're both a little bit imbalanced. I see it as, first of all, it's not two separate things at all, really. It's kind of all one thing.
Hmm.
But they both serve each other, and they synergize or whatever. It's about the struggle that you got to get to that moment, that if you watch through the whole movie and then you get to that moment of triumph and overcoming all the adversity and struggles, only then are you going to feel that deep passion and being moved by that moment.
Hmm. No, I think that, that's a
Because
good example there, being able to look at, like, just say hopping to the end of the movie to look at the final scene. Imagine if we take that, and then what if you could view your life, like a movie, and what if you just imagine
mm-hmm.
hopping to the end of your life, or something like
Mm,
that? Why
yeah,
wouldn't it be that exciting?
right,
It's all the struggle of your whole life that you want to view. It's that whole process. Um,
right.
I think that's interesting to look at there.
Yeah, and I think the reason that is, like, that dynamic works the way that it does is because it's about the fact that you didn't earn it, right?
Hmm.
The same way as skipping to the end of the movie, you didn't feel anything because you didn't travel with them to earn that moment of triumph. It's just
Hmm.
as like, or like when you play Skyrim or something, and you just start the game and you're already level 80, and you can just kill people with a single spell, and you've got all the best armor. Like, that would be really boring, actually, because it'd be
Right.
cool for 5 minutes, and you're like, oh, I'm invincible. But then
Right.
you just be like, well, like, I don't even have to worry about dying. Like there's no fun, there's no excitement in that because there's, you know, it's not even any challenge or peril to it.
Mm,
You're just a demigod off the bat, or like, you know, uh, let's take like kind of a cheesy archetype of like the rapper from rags to riches. If he just started off with the mansion and the Bugatti or whatever, but he didn't come from the streets to actually understand the meaning of those things and what it takes to actually earn it. Coming back to that earning it, you know, actually earning things.
mm. No, I think another way we can kind of take this concept that we're hitting on here, which is to sum it up shortly, you know, appreciation versus gratification. Um, and the way I think we could look at this here, specifically in context to like the truth community, you know, those of us who are actively trying to, you know, seek a freer and a better world.
Hmm.
Uh, I
Oh.
think from looking at this from a larger perspective, a global consciousness perspective,
Mhm.
I think we can see that having to go through this state of struggle, the state of oppression, uh, you know, all these different hard lessons and struggles that, you know, human beings have been experiencing for thousands of years, when we can really learn how to move past that with true wisdom, we'll really then only be able to truly appreciate what freedom and sovereignty really is,
Ooh,
as
that's
compared to
good.
just like if it was something just given to us without having to have that struggle,
Right.
and there's just like a gratification from it. But if you have
Sure.
that appreciation because you've had to have that struggle and you've had to earn it, I think that's something that, you know, from the perspective of us as, you know, a consciousness as a species, you know, on a soul level, that we can look at and kind of appreciate.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful point, Brian, because you know, what's coming to me here is when you think about the words uh, revolution, which means circular, versus
Mm-hmm.
evolution, which is more linear and
Right,
like, you know, overcoming, or at
right.
least more of a spiral where you're going somewhere with it instead
Mm-hmm.
of just going around chasing the tail of dogma, as it were.
Right.
But yeah, it's because we sort of go around and on this merry-go-round of oscillating between, you know, like my four daddies, you know, came and like, you know, founded this great nation, and then you can read all the quotes about how, you know, basically freedom must be maintained every single day, and as soon as you start taking it
Mm-hmm.
for granted is the second you're going to lose it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's that interplay of dynamic of like, you know, as each new generation is born into just this quote unquote privilege of living in a relatively free society, then they're going to take it more for granted because they don't even know what it's like to be oppressed. Therefore, they don't understand the importance of keeping tyranny in check.
When we stop evolving, we start revolving.
Mm, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And hence exactly why freedom is such an integral aspect to consciousness and the evolution of it,
Mm-hmm.
because the more conscious you become, the more free you become, assuming it's a holistic consciousness where you're
Right.
understanding the non-aggression principle as well as the self-defense principle always together.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Mm.
And I think a couple other really big areas that we can see this play out, you know, like where did this idea of wanting this instant gratification come from? And I think a few major ways we can see this play out, specifically in the context of our Western society here, is with religion and politics. So first, we could, you know, maybe look at, Christianity, you know, just because it's, you know, the more dominant religion here in the West. But this idea of a savior complex, you know, and we can see this play out with the politicians and the government too. But this idea that someone else is going to save you, you know, and that there's going to be this instant gratification, this instant forgiveness, this instant protection, if they pass this law, all these different things. It's an externalization of our responsibility. But when we do that, we think, oh, okay, so we can just give it up to this other source, whether that be on this physical plane with politicians or in the spiritual realm. And then that, oh yeah, they'll just take care of it, and it'll just be fixed like that. It's giving up total responsibility for being able to delve into and actually go through our own process and experience struggles, and then to move past those. And I think these are two obviously they're belief systems that obviously are very integrated in a very deep way into our society.
Right.
And I think they're kind of, even, foundational beliefs and assumptions that people hold in their subconscious mind. And then we see all these, other things are built off of those, really.
Right. Very right brain perspectives as well. And, absolutely both of those things, especially the Jesus savior and the politician, Trump savior, whatever kind of thing, are very, very magic pill flavored, as in like, you just, try this one weird trick to save your soul. All you got to do is, pledge yourself to
just vote.
and then you're just saved forever. Yeah. Or like, all you got to do is go and put your name in this little box, and then we'll take care of everything. That's all there is to it. It's magic pill, straight up textbook magic pill dynamic there for sure. Or the aliens, the Pleiadians are going to come save us. We don't actually have to be responsible for our condition of slavery here on the planet. We just gotta, hold the faith. And, a lot of Christian truthers kind of take this perspective as well, as like, well, sure, the world's awful and they're doing all these terrible things, but I know that all I have to do is keep my faith strong, and eventually Jesus is going to come back, and then, the rapture is going to happen and just suck us up into the sky, and we don't have to deal with any of the negative karmic, retribution of our actions here. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just so childlike. I know that's probably going to upset a lot of people, but it is. It's like no one is here but us in terms of intervening, taking action on our behalf. That is the whole point of our being incarnated here.
Right. Is to learn that responsibility.
Right. It's like if you're never going to take the training wheels off, what are you even doing? You can't say that you know how to ride a bike if you've never even taken your training wheels off. That's called growing up. At some point you have to do that.
Right. So I think, what this all, we can amount to with this instant gratification here, and I hit it on a little bit a minute ago, but we can delve into it more here, is that with the instant gratification, you always see it, and the way it's coming is in some externalized source. And it's always about distracting yourself from that journey that happens inwardly. So I think that's what we can, really look at moving towards, is to, when we can look at, okay, so we've been externalizing our power. Now, what are the steps that we can actually use to start understanding our inward journey? And for me, this is, go ahead.
Before we get to that real quick, Brian, because you're a little bit more well-versed in these things, do you want to maybe kind of do a little juxtaposition of the Jesus figure versus what Odin went through in his sacrifice, and how those two things are different? Because I think that's a very applicable dynamic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, thanks for bringing that up, because that definitely is. So in the Norse tradition, if people aren't familiar, in some of the mythos, there's a couple stories where the god Odin, he sacrificed himself in some way, made some kind of sacrifice. In one story, he sacrificed his eye in the well of Mimir to gain more wisdom. And in another story, he hung himself on the world tree, the Yggdrasil, for 9 days and 9 nights. And it was through this process of dying and coming into a higher awareness that he learned the mysteries of the runes. Um, and I think there's some great things to look at in the foundational mindset behind that. You know, where Odin, he wanted to see, one, he didn't start off as this all-knowing perfect being. He was challenging himself to seek more wisdom. He wanted to know more. And two, he didn't seek or ask anybody outside of his fucking self to do it for him. He, as a spiritual warrior, was willing to sacrifice himself to be willing to gain that knowledge and to gain that understanding. He didn't look for a savior anywhere else. He was his own savior. And that's a lot different than the whole, you know, the mindset you get with Christianity, where, you know, there was this perfect being and that, you know, you're just this kind of worthless, sinful creature that, you know, you don't have the ability or the power to save yourself. You need this outside source to save it. But
Only
whenever
Jesus.
you do this thing, it'll instantly save you, and then you'll be okay for eternity because you did this one thing. It's that whole
And
concept. Yeah.
The Bible, you know, because I remember growing up in the church, and I had thoughts about, you know, these kind of things of like, well, what about my power? Like, what am, you know, and then
Right.
they'll tell you, well, that's the folly of man. That's the words that they would say is the folly of
Mm-hmm.
man thinking he can be God. It's
Yeah.
total gaslighting.
Don't believe in
Like,
yourself.
how dare you think you have any power of your own? Just, you know, just take the magic pill and shut up and go along to get along like everybody else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's definitely the way to end up very disempowered, by
Right.
accepting a mindset that you're powerless. No,
That's
I think
a good way
that's
to do it.
definitely yeah. No, I think that's
And
a good,
Brian,
definitely a good thing
when
to
you
look at here.
when you talk about dying, when Odin died unto himself, he sacrificed himself to himself.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean symbolically? What's the true meaning of that?
Very good question. So, dying to yourself, what this means is that you're willing to really, I guess, go through a sort of an ego death is one way you could put it. You're willing to sacrifice what you thought you knew, what your understandings were, in
Right.
order to go after a new understanding. So whenever uh, you're you're actively seeking a new understanding, you're willing to let that older version of yourself
Mm,
that didn't understand that die, and
right.
then you are reborn into a higher form of consciousness, a higher awareness.
Right.
Um,
And so, you know, to kind of hit on one thing you said, because, you know, there's this idea, this word ego death that gets thrown around a lot too. And it's not to say that the ego itself is dying, or that that should be your mission in life to become more
right.
enlightened or spiritual, is to kill the ego. First of all, that's impossible. Second, that's highly unhealthy and not advisable. The ego is a part of you. It's an
Mm-hmm.
integral part of you. And a health, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a healthy ego. It's just that most people's egos are sick and out of balance, and needs that balance. But so I think what you're saying by ego death is, it's not the total death of the ego, it's the death of the false constructs and illusions of the ego that becomes identified. So
Right.
say you grow up in a, you know, very status minded household, and you're very very identified with being like an American or something like that. The ego thinks that that's who you are, you're an American,
Mm-hmm.
when that's a totally illusory and false construct. And we need to start, you know, outgrowing these little like roles that we try to play. Well, I'm American, and so Americans have to do this, or they have to be like this, or whatever. You're putting
Mm-hmm.
yourself in a box. You're putting your infinite expansive consciousness in a little flower pot, like with all your roots all squished up like this, and like, this is just who I am. We have to
Mm-hmm.
break out of that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, that's, I think, a really good depiction of dying unto yourself again and again and again, because each new level, there's always new layers that you can break through, where you're just breaking, you know, planting yourself in a bigger pot, and then you outgrow that one, and putting yourself in a bigger pot and outgrow that, you know.
Mhm.
That's all part of the process.
Right. And this process, it does feel like you're dying sometimes, like whenever you're
Yeah.
going through these
Yes.
changes. It absolutely, sometimes it can be more terrifying than death. I mean, that's what, why I think sometimes people
Mm.
get to a point that they're very unhealthy and they actually create, from the shamanic perspective,
Ooh.
they create disease for themselves because they're so afraid of dealing with those emotions and that trauma, and they get so identified with whatever story and narrative that they're telling
Yes.
themselves, that ego, that rather than being willing to die to that illusory form, that temporary form that they have, they hold on to it to the point that they become so stagnant they actually fucking kill themselves.
Oh wow. Yeah.
You know,
And
um,
check this out.
yeah,
I think you're really gonna like this. So I think so it's fear, right? They're
hmm,
clinging to this idea of who they aren't because they're so afraid of who they really are. Think about that. So
yeah,
that's why they're clean, because that false paradigm of I'm this, they cling to that so tightly because it gives them a false sense of safety of just like if I can just be this, then I fit in and I know
hmm,
who I am because I really don't know who the fuck I am and I'm scared to
right,
find that out. I'm scared to
mm,
explore and find out who I really am. So they cling like like I always say, they cling to a shark like a life preserver. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like that's gonna save them. Meanwhile, it's eating them alive.
right, exactly. So I think that's hitting on a great thing that we can kind of tie in with the whole talk here is that it's that clinging on to that external source for that instant gratification of just getting by a little bit longer that's really killing us, because we've externalized ourselves. So, what is the solution?
Mm,
And what I've found in my experience and practice, not only in my personal practice, but also in, clients' experience with clients, that the arts of gnosis, that those are absolutely like foundational knowledge to really start learning, to get into yourself. Astrology is obviously a great place to get a foundational mindset or blueprint, a base of your psychology and how you're operating. And then there's other arts of gnosis that, like, the runes that you can then fine tune and deal with specific situations and things like that. But
mm,
being able to access these and use them as tools to reflect back to yourself, what you may not have been aware of is extremely useful, because when you can become aware of the variables and how they're interacting, you can then start to choose to change how those variables are interacting and change
mm.
the
Because
outcome.
you're empowered, right? Knowledge is
Right.
power if you can actually apply that.
Absolutely.
Yes. And that's
Um,
yeah, that's such a
mm,
great point there because essentially, I think a lot of people that might be attracted to this channel, attracted to what we have to say and all this kind of stuff, you're only here because you already have at least some kind of inkling that there's something kind of not quite right with the world or your place in it or where does this all fit together or
yeah.
whatever. And so you know that the constructs that like we were just talking about that you're identified with are not serving you anymore. You know that they're falling short and there's something not substantial there. So what better place to go from that into, what better place to start than the arts of gnosis, because that really is such a good jumping off point
It's
of
knowing
getting you more
thyself.
into. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's and some of the things, like I said, I do with the astrology is not only does it give you a foundational um, understanding of how you kind of operate psychologically, but I also give you very practical tools, so you can look at like where you're going and kind of what you fall back on and kind of the dance between those two states of
Mm.
being. I give you tools to be able to like help empower yourself and with like specific little tricks, but also looking at things like the aruta lagna, which is how you should project yourself, the costume that you're supposed to wear, in order to
Right.
walk your dharma.
Which doesn't mean costume like faking somehow, but more just as a way to present yourself authentically, but in a surefire way that people will respond to you the way that you want to be responded to,
Right.
and
Well, yeah, it's
interact with other people in that way.
right. I would say it's really like the costume of your true self. Like if you were to, when you start the video game, it's kind of like, you go through and you pick your character and they've kind of got a certain little, outfit or whatever. You can kind of look at it like that, this is your character that you wanted to play. This is the outfit that you're going. And then, I look
Right.
at goals, specific karmic things you're supposed to learn in this life, how to access and, achieve those things. Like I can really fine tune it and get into depth. And then beyond that, beyond the ritual, and I think a lot of people forget this, but the most powerful part of what you get is you're beyond the reading. The most powerful part of what you get is the ritual, because you can then take that and start actually doing it and applying it, and that's really where you're going to start doing a lot of major work.
Right.
Actually getting the reading and becoming, intellectually aware of all the different factors. That's part of it, but then you can really start to integrate it with the ritual and then start to be able to bring these things that were suppressed up to the surface and deal with them and process them. Exactly. And then when you start to know yourself on a level like that, I can't describe just how much clarification it helps you bring in. And maybe a lot of things that this is one thing that I get a lot of feedback on, is that sometimes I'll let people know about certain things or placements in their chart that they've known and they've felt this, but they've maybe felt like guilty about it, or they've had some kind of shame about it, or they feel like, oh, this is something that's like my weakness. But then when I can frame to them and show that this is just this is just one of these challenges that you wanted to have this energy to work with, because there was a lesson behind it. You put a resistance there for yourself, because that was what is going to make you grow. And when you can start to look at these things, you can really start to empower yourself and not necessarily feel like guilty or shameful about maybe some of your weaknesses or challenges that you have. Because as you know, I in my consultations, I always like to remind everybody that our weaknesses can be our strengths and our strengths can be our weaknesses. It's really all how we're interacting with the energy, tying that back with the principle mentalism.
Right. And like, to riff on what you said there too about kind of like setting yourself up for those challenges, it kind of takes us back full circle to what I sort of opened up with about how, the struggle is inevitable, but if you spend your whole life avoiding that struggle, it's going to find you anyway, and then you're just going to always be on the reactive rather than proactive. That's a very important dynamic there. Just getting blown around in the winds of chaos in the universe, and there's no methodical approach to it. You're not going to get the same kind of gains out of those experiences as if you choose the way that you meet that struggle, and you're saying, well, if I do it this way, I'm going to set myself up in this exact way and really maximize your gains so that you can just level the fuck up right through it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we can close here with a little quote that I came up with earlier as we were brainstorming here. Instead of looking for a savior, start looking to save yourself. Little play on words there. But yeah, it all comes back to you. This is, sovereignty is the number one, principle at the Wizard Factory. And you can do that, anytime you choose to. It's always a choice that you have to make.
It's a choice to become empowered, inspired, and encouraged.
That's right. So I think, that's going to wrap up our episode tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed this. Please let us know, in the comments what you think, or maybe a potential topic you might like to see us do in the future, or a guest that you'd like us to try to connect with and get on the show. We're always open to listening to our people. We love you very much, and we hope you've enjoyed this, and have a great evening.
Yes, indeed.